Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. We're so happy that you are back. And guess what? We have someone else back. I always say people are a glutton for punishment, but I don't know. She might enjoy being with us because we love her. And she's like a one name person, like Madonna, Cher, Beyonce. That's what I always like to think of her as. So who is it, Jerry?
Oh my goodness, it is Yaritza. And we just get so excited when we see her. I was just telling her, I wish I could hug you.
I
Jamie
know.
and I
But we
love
did.
Yaritza. Yeah, we
We
did our
did hug
best.
her at ISTE last year.
We
At
did.
ISTE. That was
It's not
great.
enough. Yeah, it's not enough. I
No.
just want to say
No.
that Yaritza was a high school teacher in Brooklyn, and she has come from the classroom to the world stage. She is keynoting and talking about global collaboration. She is writing books. And she has a quote that I love that says she believes that we become educators because someone shined the light on the profession for us. Yaritza, welcome to the show. And who shined that light for you?
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I am so happy to be back. I feel like we've done this for like 3 years. I don't know. I feel like it's like 3 years
I know. We learn.
time, but every time for me feels like it's the first time because we always have something new to discuss and to share with the audience. For me, I feel like I became a teacher early on. If you've heard my story before, I've always shared the fact that I was an immigrant. And when I came to the United States, a lot of the kids in our family, our responsibility was to learn first and then bring back everything that we learned for our parents who were working 3 to 4 jobs. And so for me, my first teacher was my sister. She made learning so much fun because after school it was like, well, what are we actually going to do? We can't go outside, right? We're new to this environment. So what are we going to do? And she used to play school with me, and I used to learn a lot of the content that she was learning. And so she shined that light on making learning joyous and fun, because I would learn everything that she was learning, which was at a different grade level, but she made it bite sized, and it was like different activities. And although it was some things that I was just like, why am I learning this? I didn't feel like overwhelmed because she made it fun. So that was like my first teacher. And then the second person was a teacher by the name of Miss Bristol. She was the best teacher. I will never forget this particular educator. She knew how difficult it was for my family to assimilate into the United States. And my brother and I was in the same elementary school. So on Saturdays and even after schools, it's like we would go to the classroom, we would take care of the classroom pet. We had guinea pigs. And she was my first introduction to African American literature and poetry. So she would sign me up for these poetry slams. And by sixth grade, I was already like presenting at Mega Evers College, Langston Hughes poems, and it was amazing. So those were the educators, and although my sister isn't an educator, she's one for me who really shined a light on education and why it's so important to have people in your life who are willing to take that extra step to make learning fun.
And learning, yes, learning fun. That is so great. That is so great. So, as I mentioned, we learn from you each time you come on. And since you've been on, you've been so busy. I think when the last time you did announce your first book, but now you've had several since then. So let's hear, what are your books? What have you been doing with those? And what are the messages that you're trying to get across to the readers in each book? Share the trajectory so that we can get in on the learning as well.
Of course. The series is called McKenzie's Adventures. My daughter is Mackenzie.
That's right, because the last time she was just born. So we were so excited about the reveal of the book's name. And okay, yes, right, right.
Yep,
So
she
good.
was just born at that time. And so all of my books have her name in it because she's always the main character. She's the main character in my life. So therefore, she's the main character in the books. And the books is kind of like taking folks on a journey. So the first one, Mackenzie's Time Machine, is this book for kids. I would say elementary school, grade level, and it just exposes students to the untold, kind of like African American and people of color who are heroes, but are not really mentioned in textbooks. So, like a person like Kehinde Wiley, who he's the one who drew actually this portrait of Michelle Obama, and I don't, you can't really see the Barack Obama one, but he's famous for that. And he's from New York City, but we don't really talk about him, right? We don't really talk about people who have done monumental things, who look like myself. And then it also kind of like just exposes people to people from the past, right? So, not the Harriet Tubmans, not the Rosa Parks. We're constantly hearing about them, but I want to hear more about the people that we don't talk about. I want to hear about the the authors, the illustrators, the people who've literally created structures in the United States, who have made bold decisions to stand up against injustices. And so that's the first book. The first book is literally me telling Mackenzie a story about our past, with it beginning with life in Africa. And I made that bold statement because a lot of classrooms forget to say that life itself began in Africa. Regardless of what your background is, the first human remains were founded in Africa. And so I made that a point to start that in a story, but also the contributions of ancient Egyptians in concepts like math and calendar days. And then the second book is called Mackenzie's Bisabuela. As you all know, I was born in Panama. And so this was like a homage to my Afro Latino culture, but also my grandmother, which is Mackenzie's bisabuela, or her great grandmother. My grandmother returned from Panama very sick. And the first thing that came to mind in my mind was, there goes all of our traditions. There goes my culture. There goes a part of me that I wish that my daughter was able to experience, meaning from my grandmother or the matriarch of our family's perspective, right? I can still keep the traditions going, but there's nothing like tasting that fruit cake that my grandmother would make. And so I felt like the only way that I can kind of like hold on to all of those memories and our struggles with just coming into the United States and building something for ourselves was by telling the story. And so in Mackenzie's Bisabuela, I take Mackenzie on a journey through our storytelling. Whenever my family gets together, we storytell, whether if it's for Thanksgiving, someone's birthday. Well, first and foremost, we find a reason to celebrate everything. If you was to say that you got a new job promotion, everyone would be at your house. We're all cooking, we're all dancing, we're all doing karaoke, we're all playing La Pipona, which is a card game that we play, and we're having fun. We celebrate everything. If your child lost their first tooth, we're having a party for that as well. And so in the book, I'm taking Mackenzie on this journey through this storytelling of who the matriarch in my family is, but also how we got to America. So our story of my great grandmother actually being the daughter of an enslaved woman and living in Great Britain, and then her migrating to Panama, which is how my family got to Panama, and then my grandmother's decision to bring us to America. And so, kind of like, I don't want Mackenzie to grow up and say, I don't know where I came from, right? The idea is you have these books that are telling the story for you. So if there's ever a day where I can no longer share these stories with you, you can always pull out your books and say, this is me, this is my heritage, this is my culture. And then because I'm Panamanian, of course I had to create the book in Spanish as well. So the third book was La Bisabuela de Mackenzie, which is the same as the second, just in Spanish. And then the newest book, our newest release, which is released this Friday, is Mackenzie and the Secret Library of Banned Books. So all these books are journeys, they're adventures, which is why we call the series Mackenzie's Adventures. This one in particular is focusing on the banned books here in the United States. It was my way of paying homage to those authors who have put so much work into their books, only to see it banned in certain states like Florida and Texas, and the list goes on. And so, what I did was I thought about what would be the messaging behind the book. And the idea was, why not create a book that speaks to identity and culture and exposes oppression, and yet shows teachers how to integrate generative AI in the classroom for lesson planning, or students to how to use generative AI to kind of like find out what books have been banned and what are the similarities in it. Mackenzie goes through this first week of high school. And so, there's so much emotions. You're still trying to find yourself. You're small because you just came from middle school. So everyone else is like bigger than you. But she's discovering that there are some teachers who are very welcoming and others who are really nasty, which is typically what students deal with. And so this book is kind of like raw and bold and unapologetic, and basically saying that we need to do better as a community, meaning the educator community, but also as a nation. Um, there's a light that's shined literally on the United States, and people look to the United States for any kind of advancements, right? If especially in education, I've traveled as a consultant, and people usually say, "Hey, those standards," and I go, "Yeah, they're just standards. They're just standards. You're doing way better than most schools in the United States right now because you're willing to accept differences." And with this book, we're exposing the fact that differences are not appreciated. This book doesn't only talk about anti-racism. I'm definitely giving a shout out to Dr. Kendi in this book, but it also talks about, the true diary of a part-time Indian. I talk about sexism. I talk about homosexuality. I talk about the Nazi death camps. I talk about, if you think about it, I've mentioned it. So there is no one theme, but I would say that this book is created to empower student voice and choice in banned books. And I've done my best to advocate for students being able to read anything that's of interest to them, but also books that they can relate to beyond just culture or race. Yeah. And just, I mean, think about the students who are already feeling isolated or feeling as if they're by themselves in the classroom, right? Like, I know for some of my friends, the library was kind of like that safe haven of, I don't want to be in a cafeteria because there's just too much going on at lunch. So I would rather go into the library. I would rather sit in like a nook or a corner and read a book or do whatever kids do in libraries. And now we're kind of taking away that safe haven, because if you're banning all of these books that speaks to who I am, then what's the real reason for me to go into this library if I can't find anything that I can relate to?
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, have you had anyone saying they're going to ban your book?
Well, not yet because it isn't out yet.
Yes.
but
Oh,
but I did have a conversation with a friend of mine on Friday, and he was like, "So what happens if they do ban your book?"
yeah.
And I said, "Well, it's kind of like good publicity.
It
that, mean,
is.
that means I did something right."
Yes.
But the
And you're
hopes are that this book isn't banned, and that this can kind of be used as a way for teachers to teach the books that have been banned, because within the book, Mackenzie's character summarizes these books, right? So it's kind of like, well, if I can't read these books because they're banned in my state, but I have
this.
Mackenzie and the Secret Library of Banned Books in my hand, I can still learn about some of these books. It's
Yes.
just coming from a character, and she's literally advocating for why we're not talking about these books. Like a book like Monday's Not Coming, where you have it where women in the United States, especially women of color who have been abducted and no one's looking for them. These
Mm,
are teenagers around the United States. No one's talking about this, right? But that book highlighted it, and now it's banned. And so I even wanted to highlight that book because we're not talking about some of these issues and these challenges that our teenagers and our kids are
yeah.
experiencing on a daily basis. What legislatures is doing is like, they're basically saying, I'd rather you not have this discussion. I'd rather us see things in black and white, which for centuries we've been fighting for people to acknowledge that black and white are not the only two colors that exist.
Right.
And people have to be open-minded to the idea of diversity and the idea that no two people are alike. I assumed that that's what this nation was built on, right? It was built on the back of immigrants who are not just black and white. And so if we're going to allow people to come into this country and say, hey, this is your safe haven, help me build, then why are we not creating these opportunities for these people to feel like they're American and they're part of the American dream?
Yes, exactly. Well, I love that you have created this book and it comes out on Friday on your birthday. What a
On your
birthday present.
birthday. That's so nice. It's just a clever way of honoring the authors and the stories and the messages and getting that out. I just think it's so wonderful. What a great idea. Now, how did you choose the books to highlight? Did you just kind of cover all of the different challenges that exist and make sure that you're kind of covering the span of those? Was that your strategy there?
Yeah. So when I first made a decision to kind of like write this book, I had a conversation with Dee Lanier and Ken Shelton. We were at a conference. I forget what conference, probably ISTE. Um, and I was like, hey, I'm going to write this book. I'm giving you all the heads up that I'm going to write this book. And I was like, but I don't want to focus on just one topic, because if I focus on one topic, then it makes it seem as if there's only one specific topic or theme that has been banned in America, when we know there's so many. And so Dee was like, why don't you look up a list of those books and figure out what's going to be the themes that you actually highlight in this book, and make sure that they speak to your diverse audience. And so that was the feedback that I received from Dee. So right after that, I began to look at different lists. And then I began to see the books that were being banned the most, and those are the books that I highlighted, right? Because there has to be a reason
Yeah,
why you
right.
keep banning this book. And so I said, okay, well, those are going to be the books that I highlight, because I want to empower students who really want to read these books but don't have access to it. Now you can get a snippet of it and advocate for yourself, or advocate as to why this needs to be within the school building.
I love that. And we actually are, Dee and Ken have a book coming out
Yeah.
soon too. They're going to be coming on the podcast. So we'll tell them that you gave them a shout out for a little conversation that helped guide your path for this. That's great. How did you tie in AI? You mentioned you tied AI into that. How did you do that?
So as a classroom teacher and now as an education consultant, I'm always being asked, how do you really kind of like open your classroom to the idea of using AI without teachers feeling as if students are cheating? And so there's this character, Mr. Smith. He's an AP calculus teacher, McKenzie's AP calculus teacher. And during the first day, he introduces himself and he goes, okay, it's time for a pre assessment, which some teachers do, right? They forget about the SEL stuff, they forget about all the training, and they go, we're going to use this as the basis for what kind of work I should give you. And so Mr. Smith is that teacher. And he makes kind of like this comment of, and no, you can't use textbooks, and no, you can't use Bing Chat, and no, you can't use Chat GPT. And then Mackenzie goes, well, I kind of used generative AI in middle school to tutor myself. And that's the reason why I'm taking AP Calculus as a freshman. We have so many kids who are using AI to tutor themselves. And then they get into the classroom and the teachers are saying, you can't use this, but not fully understanding that students are not with the teacher 24/7. So when you make yourself unavailable to a student, what other devices or resources are they going to use to teach themselves? So Mackenzie finds herself saying that, and hence, kind of like throughout the book, she gives teachers tips for how to use AI within the classroom, right? So if teachers are reading the book, they'll see, aha, I can use it for this, as opposed to thinking that it's cheating. So Mackenzie herself kind of like introduces it and say, well, that's the reason why I'm kind of like in this AP Calc class, because I used it to tutor myself. And then later on in the book, she revisits those skills of asking AI questions to kind of like find out what books have been banned, and then create her own book club for banned books.
Wow. So she's using it not to cheat, but to learn and to grow.
Right,
Yes,
right.
exactly why we're in education.
Yes, exactly. And
Yes.
this is why you said earlier it's a book to empower
Yeah.
students. And so this gives a
Yes.
perfect example of how you're doing that. I love that. So
Now, this is
clever. Good
fantastic.
for you. I love it.
Aside from writing books and doing all the things you do, you're also traveling and keynoting.
Yeah.
What are you talking about in your keynotes?
Woo.
The
So
topics.
at Nightscape, my focus was global collaboration.
Yes.
If folks have been following me, you know that I am big on creating global experiences that are asynchronous. My experiences have spanned across 6 continents so far. I've been able to engage over 800 different classrooms in over 60 different countries within the past
It's
few
my
months.
dream. I love it.
And so my
Mm.
keynote was on effective practices for global collaboration. And now this week in Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska, I'll be keynoting at ASTE 24. And my keynote is on creativity. So literally just reimagining what innovation and imagination looks like.
I love that because
Yeah.
we've lost that for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are we going to get it back, Yaritza?
We have to think about what we used to love and enjoy when we were kids. Whenever I think about creativity, I always say there's no one way of being creative, right? Some folks may use that term. I remember when the term innovative was like this term where, like, throughout the school building, I was hearing it and I was getting feedback, and they're like, that is so innovative. And I go, define what innovative is. Because for me, it was just, yeah, I'm thinking outside the box, but what's the definition of innovative if I'm going to be kind of like rated on this scale? And so when the idea of keynoting this conference came up, my whole like keynote is on the idea of there's no right way to be creative. We're all creative in our own way, right? We think outside the box. No two people think alike. No two people have the same interests. But what brings us together is this idea of accepting that. And so I know when I was a child, what I had to hold on to was my imagination, whether if it was drawing, coloring, learning. When someone speaks to me, if I'm in a lecture, my mind like kind of races and I have to picture something in order to understand it. But that's me kind of using my prior knowledge, but also the descriptive language that that presenter is using. And so when I think about creativity, it takes me all the way back to when I was a kid. I remember I used to play in the dirt a lot. And I used to pretend that I was making pies. But what I would do is like I would mix up mud and I would like put it together and then I would like have a fake oven. And for me, that was my way of kind of like being like, this housewife. I used to see my mom bake a lot. So when I was outside, I was like, I'm making mud pies. And I had my imagination, I had my creativity, and I would use a box to like have a fake oven. But for me, that was creativity. It was me taking what I've seen my mom do and now using all the elements that I found outside in the house, well, outside of the house, and then make it for the kids in the neighborhood. We didn't eat the pies, but it was fun to say, well, now I'm the mom and I'm going to give you a slice of pie, regardless of if it had worms or not, right? The worms were a plus. And so with this keynote, it's taking the educators right back to what were you like as a child? How did you kind of like maneuver around the real world? I know most of us didn't have that experience, so we had to kind of like step into the positions of being adults. Not like how kids have to now, right? Because now kids are being exposed to so much. They're being exposed to genocide. They're being exposed to war. They're seeing things as soon as they get on their phones that are just atrocious, right? Climate change, people are losing their lives on a daily basis. I didn't get exposed to all of that when I was a kid because the news wasn't at my fingertips. I literally had to sit in front of a TV or a radio to listen to the news. And so I was able to experience my childhood where it was filled with bliss. And creativity should be the same, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of what product a kid brings to the classroom. If we're saying, hey, use this time to create a song, like right now, I have 5 continents engaged in a global music exchange, and kids are creating music through Soundtrack for Education, and they're self-advocating for change through music. And I'm saying this is not going to look the same because there's kids from different countries. So what you may find as an issue in your neighborhood and community looks totally different than what kids are experiencing in Ghana or Nigeria or Singapore. But the commonality is there are issues around the world that needs to be addressed, and we have to expose kids to those problems, but we have to allow them to self-advocate in a way that they themselves want to do so, which is that creative or imaginative bone that they have in their bodies.
I love that. And this is a great time of year for a keynote like that because
Yeah.
teachers get there are so many different um, types of demands on teachers between
Mhm.
pacing guides and testing and benchmarks, and so they lose their way, whereas
Yeah.
that may have been their initial attraction to being a teacher, and maybe they started out even the beginning of the school year in that way, but it's just so hard to stay on track. So it's so nice to it's going to be so nice for them at that keynote, but then also in this podcast, your message of don't forget that bliss of
Yeah.
creativity from your childhood and bring that to the
Yeah.
classroom whenever possible. Absolutely. I love it. So great. So
Well,
great.
thank
And
you.
then, of course, you mentioned your global projects. I think they are phenomenal. That was my favorite thing to do when I was a teacher. It was a lot of work, but it was so worth it seeing the kids communicate with school in Uganda and school in Australia and doing different projects. I love how you're bringing music into it. How often do you offer these? Are they still going on? How can teachers get involved? What's the scoop there?
So I usually offer it every 2 months. We have one that's literally going on right now. It began in January. It finishes February 29th. It's on a global music exchange. Um, I usually just post on my socials, whether if it's Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And it's kind of like a call to action for teachers, right? So I usually just say, hey, this is the theme. And we're still going to align it to the sustainable development goals. So although the theme is music, remember I'm showing kids how to use Soundtrack for education. Everything is on flip because of accessibility, but during one of those weeks, students have to think about the sustainable development goals. They have to think about what's impacting their communities, and then they have to create a product. And that product for this global music exchange is a song. And one of the weeks, I believe, week 6 and 7, the product is a podcast through Soundtrack for Education. So students are able to choose that SDG and create a podcast where they're addressing this issue, but because Soundtrack for Education allows students to collaborate regardless of where they are in the world, this is a good time for students who are in Paris, in New York, to collaborate with each other on a podcast and interview each other on the issues. And so this is kind of like a way to kind of like push and shove students to kind of like throw them in there and say, hey, collaborate, ask the questions that I can't answer or your teacher is not able to answer, and you have the floor to do so in a respectful manner. Students are learning about digital citizenship. I'm touching on almost every ISTE standard, whether you're looking at the educator's point of view or the student's perspective. And once again, reiterating the idea of have fun, right? And everything looks different. During the first week, I'm just asking them to explore flip, explore Soundtrack for education. Second and third week, I'm asking them positive affirmations and to introduce yourself, right? What kind of music do you like? Does your parents and the elders in your community listen to the same music? What's the historical significance? So trying to get into those key terms, but also what's the comparison or contractions of these, the music that you're listening to, the melodies. And then I'm asking them to kind of like put everything together, whether if it's a cultural song and what they listen to now, and make their own beat. And then by week 4, they're taking that beat, they're writing down positive affirmations, and then they're creating a song, mixing in their positive affirmations with the week that they created, with the song that they created. And then we go into the podcasting, and then kind of like their call to action. So what's next? How does this all align to what's happening around the world?
That's fabulous. That is such my passion. So I love to hear about that. Did so that's going on now. It's 2 months, and then do you have another one lined up for? And how do teachers sign up? Right, so it's classrooms that sign up, and they do that through you on social media, and it's always connected to Flip is their means of communication, and they find out on social.
Yep. So teachers sign up. I usually share out the forms. They're split up into grade levels. So it was like K through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 8, 9 through 12, and then I've even done higher ed. And they sign up according to the grade level that they teach. And then what happens is the teachers get exposed to the content on Flip first, so they have all access to it. And the idea is that you as a teacher, if you need help, you're reaching out to me saying, Yaritza, I need one-on-one. I need you to break this down. But I also kind of like send videos on how to use Flip. That way they can see themselves how to use immersive reader, how to edit closed captions. So that way when students are uploading videos, they're editing their closed captions so that other students around the world are able to translate the closed captions into their own languages. And then by week 2, now teachers are bringing on their students. So it's kind of like a 2-week gap of just explore, add students, and then the actual experience begins. So you have 2 weeks to kind of like familiarize yourself first, but all contact is through me. So although I was consulting with Flip, these were experiences that I myself created on my own. So they will continue with me even though I'm no longer consulting with Flip, which makes it extra fun. I actually had a message from a teacher today, Jill Armstrong. She's like, I hope you continue it. I know you're not, with Flip anymore. I was like, of course I'm going to continue it. But I usually create the theme based off of something I've read, something I've seen. So I don't know what the theme of the next one is going to be. But I can assure you it would have something to do with changing times.
Okay, good.
Great.
Oh,
And
it's so
if
exciting.
we haven't learned one lesson with COVID, the lesson I think we learned was we are all one big community, no matter where we are, where we live. And so this really promotes that collaboration to begin to work together, which is so helpful for our youth.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
so many great things here today. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I can't wait to share
It
it.
was. It was. And we just can't wait to see you again. But until then, where can people find you? You mentioned your socials a lot.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at Yaritza V_. I'm on Instagram at Yaritza.V__. But if you're not on social, you can definitely find me on my website at McKenzie'sadventures.com. Everything is there on that website. My socials, the books, upcoming events. I'll be in Alaska this week, but I have some upcoming events before heading out to Ghana in July and ISTE in June. And as I mentioned, I'm an education consultant. So if you need assistance on curriculum development or discussing any of my books, I'm definitely open to that idea.
Wonderful. We'll have all of the details in the description below, so check it out. Thank you so much for coming, and you're going to come back, I know, because
Yes.
good. Thank
She
you.
never stops.
Thank
She
you.
never stops doing something new.
I know.
Thank you so much, Yaritza, and best of luck and safe travels to you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I can't wait to come back.
Yes. Oh, you will be.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.